Right now, as you watch this, ships are sitting still in one of the most dangerous stretches of water on the planet. Tankers loaded with oil, warships running dark, drones circling at altitude, and radar dishes spinning, tracking every vessel that dares to move. A ceasefire was just announced, leaders are shaking hands, cameras are rolling, everyone's calling it peace, but nobody told the Strait of Hormuz 20% of the world's oil supply moves through a channel so narrow you could drive across it in less time than it takes to watch this video. 34 miles wide at its tightest point. And right now, every navy with a stake in this conflict, American, Iranian, British, Emirati, is parked at that bottleneck, engines running, waiting to see who blinks first. A ceasefire on paper is not a ceasefire at sea. And what happens in the next few weeks at Hormuz will determine whether fuel prices spike, whether insurance companies shut down shipping routes, and whether the peace everyone's celebrating actually holds or cracks wide open. We're going to break all of it down: the naval standoff, the hidden mine threat, the oil market angles most analysts won't touch, and the one tiny sliver of land that might just be the most important piece of real estate in the world right now. Before we dive in, where are you watching from? And do you know which country controls the southern shore of Hormuz? Drop your answer below. Most people get it wrong, so let's get clear on what actually happened. A ceasefire was reached. The agreement covers the land conflict, troop positions, airstrikes, missile exchanges, diplomatic language about sovereignty, de-escalation, and monitored withdrawal. What it does not cover: naval movements. What it does not cover: maritime territorial claims. What it does not cover: the dozens of mines, fast attack boats, and submarine assets already positioned in and around the Persian Gulf. Nobody writes, "Also, please remove your mines" in a ceasefire agreement. That's not how it works. So here's the exact question this video is answering. When the guns go quiet on land, what actually happens to the world's most strategically dangerous waterway? And the answer is not simple, because Hormuz isn't just an oil route. It's a pressure valve, a choke point where a single incident, one ship hit, one mine detonated, one miscalculation, can spike the price of fuel in your country within 48 hours. It happened during the tanker war in 1987. It nearly happened in 2019 when Iranian forces seized a British tanker in the Strait. And the architecture of that risk hasn't gone away just because someone signed a piece of paper. This is what we're unpacking today, layer by layer, starting with the water itself. But the story the headlines are telling you isn't the whole picture. Pull up any map of the Middle East. Find the Persian Gulf. Now trace your finger to the very bottom of it, where the Gulf pinches together before it opens into the Arabian Sea. That narrow corridor, that's Hormuz. Iran owns the northern shore. Oman owns the southern shore. The navigable shipping channel, the lane where supertankers actually travel, is only about 21 miles wide. 2 lanes in, 2 lanes out, separated by a median zone. That's it. That's the gate through which Saudi oil, Kuwaiti oil, Emirati oil, and Iraqi oil must pass to reach the rest of the world. Let me show you what's actually happening there right now. Let's start with what's sitting in the water. The United States 5th Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain, has maintained a carrier strike group in the region throughout this conflict. That means a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, 2 guided missile cruisers, and a screen of destroyers, all within rapid response distance of Hormuz. During the height of the conflict, the U.S. also surged additional destroyers and a submarine into the Gulf. Some of those have not stood down. They're still there. On the other side, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the IRGCN, operates differently from any conventional naval force you've studied. They don't try to match the American ship for ship. They can't. What they do instead is saturate. The IRGCN operates what military analysts call swarm doctrine. Instead of large warships, they deploy dozens, sometimes over 100, small, fast-attack craft simultaneously. Cigarette boats, armed speedboats, missile-equipped patrol vessels. The idea is to overwhelm a destroyer's close-in weapon systems. A U.S. warship can engage multiple targets at once, but there is a saturation threshold. Flood the zone with enough boats moving at 40 knots from different vectors, and something gets through. A ceasefire does not demobilize these assets. They're dispersed in small ports and inlets along Iran's 2,500 miles of Gulf coastline. They can be at sea within minutes. Allied navies haven't fully stood down either. British Royal Navy assets, French naval vessels operating under European mission mandates, and UAE patrol craft are all still in the region. Everyone is watching everyone. And that mutual surveillance, that constant tension of warships within visual range of each other, is its own kind of risk. one misread signal, one vessel that moves without announcing itself on the maritime radio. These are how accidents happen. A ceasefire removes intent. It doesn't remove capability, and it absolutely doesn't remove proximity. Now here's the threat that gets almost no coverage, but that naval commanders think about constantly. Mines. Iran has mined the Strait of Hormuz before. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, a period called the Tanker War, Iranian forces laid mines across major shipping routes in the Gulf. In 1988, the USS Samuel B. Roberts struck one of those mines. The explosion nearly sank the ship. The U.S. retaliated in Operation Praying Mantis, destroying 2 Iranian oil platforms and sinking several Iranian vessels. All of that, a near war between the U.S. and Iran, started with a single mine. The technology has changed dramatically since then. Today's naval mines are nothing like the round, spiked contact mines you've seen in old war films. Modern influence mines use combinations of acoustic sensors, magnetic field detectors, and pressure sensors to identify specific target profiles. A mine can be programmed to ignore vessels below a certain tonnage, fishing boats, patrol craft, and activate only when it detects the acoustic signature and magnetic signature of a supertanker or a warship. This is called a ship counter. The mine might sit dormant through the first 5 ships and detonate on the 6th. Mine clearance operations against this generation of weapons are slow, dangerous, and require specialized vessels. A 20-mile shipping lane with even a handful of intelligent mines can be closed for weeks while clearance teams sweep it. No ceasefire agreement contains a mine clearance protocol. That's a separate negotiation with separate technical teams on a separate timeline. If you've made it this far, you already understand more about Hormuz than most of the political analysts you see on television. Keep going, because what's coming next is the part nobody wants to say out loud. The uncomfortable reality is that neither side may even know the full extent of what's been placed in these waters during the conflict. Covert mine-laying operations, sometimes conducted by small boats at night with minimal crew, are notoriously difficult to track or document. The ledger may not be complete. And an incomplete ledger means a merchant captain transiting Hormuz in the coming weeks is making a bet, not a calculation. Now let's talk about money, because money is what makes Hormuz matter to everyone, not just the countries with warships in the water. During the conflict, oil futures spiked. Brent crude, the global benchmark, jumped sharply on every escalation and pulled back on every sign of de-escalation. The ceasefire announcement brought a partial pullback in prices. Markets like certainty, and a ceasefire is a form of certainty, even if it's fragile certainty. But here's what the price chart doesn't show you. There's a cost embedded in every barrel of oil that transits Hormuz that most people never hear about: war risk insurance. Shipping companies are required to carry it. Insurers like Lloyd's of London assess the risk level of every major maritime route and apply a surcharge, called a war risk premium, to policies covering vessels in those waters. During periods of elevated tension, that premium can multiply by 5, 10, or even 20 times its baseline rate. Critically, even after a ceasefire is announced, Lloyd's and other syndicates keep elevated war risk premiums in place for 60 to 90 days as a matter of standard procedure. The market is pricing in the possibility that the ceasefire doesn't hold, so every tanker transiting Hormuz right now is paying that surcharge. Every surcharge adds to the cost of shipping. Every added cost eventually reaches the pump. A ceasefire doesn't end the Hormuz premium. Only sustained stability does. Who benefits from this? Counterintuitively, not just the oil exporters. Any country with spare refining capacity, any nation holding strategic petroleum reserves, any energy trader with the right futures positions, they all profit from sustained uncertainty. This is why Hormuz is never just a military story. The economics of instability have their own constituency. Now let's zoom out and look at the players, because every country surrounding this strait has a different reason to want a different outcome. Iran's leverage is the strait itself. Tehran has publicly threatened to close Hormuz on multiple occasions. Doing so would be an act of war against most of the world's major economies simultaneously. But the threat alone is valuable. It gives Iran a card to play in any negotiation. A ceasefire weakens that card. Iran now needs to recalibrate. How do you maintain strategic deterrence in peacetime? Saudi Arabia and the UAE desperately want Hormuz open and stable. Every closed day costs them hundreds of millions in lost export revenue. They've invested years in developing bypass pipelines, the UAE's Habshan-Fujairah pipeline, Saudi Arabia's East-West pipeline, specifically to reduce Hormuz dependence. But those pipelines don't carry enough capacity to fully replace the strait. They're a hedge, not a solution. Then there's China. Beijing is the quiet actor here. Approximately 70% of the oil that passes through Hormuz is bound for Asian markets, and China is the single largest destination. Beijing has enormous economic interest in keeping Hormuz open. And because both Iran and several Gulf states need Chinese trade, investment, and diplomatic support, Beijing has rare leverage over both sides simultaneously. This is not widely discussed in Western coverage. It should be. Here's the geography most people miss completely. Oman controls the southern shore of Hormuz, but not through its mainland. The relevant territory is Musandam, a small exclave of Oman that juts directly into the strait, separated from the rest of Oman by the UAE. From the Musandam Peninsula, particularly from the port of Khasab, Omani naval and intelligence assets have direct line-of-sight monitoring of all traffic in the navigable channel. No other nation can physically observe the strait from that angle without involving another country's territory. This makes Oman the invisible referee of Hormuz. It also explains why Oman has historically served as the secret back channel between Iran and Western powers. They are geographically, physically embedded in the most sensitive maritime zone on Earth. When Washington and Tehran need to talk without being seen talking, Muscat is often the room where it happens. Most people watching this conflict didn't even know Oman had territory inside the strait itself. Now you do. Hit like if this is changing the way you're reading this situation, and tell me in the comments, what do you think Oman's next move is? So where does this go from here? Let's be honest, nobody knows for certain. But there are 3 realistic scenarios, and the signals in the water right now point toward which one is most likely. Scenario 1, full normalization. Naval forces gradually stand down. Mine clearing begins under international oversight. Shipping insurance premiums return to baseline within 90 days. This scenario requires all parties to actively cooperate, which means it requires trust. Trust takes time to rebuild after a shooting conflict. This is the optimistic scenario, and historically, it's the slowest to materialize. Scenario 2, frozen conflict. The ceasefire holds on paper, but naval postures remain elevated. Ships continue transiting but under escort. Insurance premiums stay high. Incidents, a detained vessel here, an electronic interference event there, occur below the threshold of ceasefire violation. Both sides use ambiguity as a tool. This is the most historically common outcome. It looks like peace. It isn't. Scenario 3, ceasefire collapse. A miscalculation, a domestic political crisis, an assassination, a provocation that demands a response, and the conflict reignites. Hormuz closes or is threatened with closure. Oil spikes, global markets panic. This scenario is not the most likely, but it's also not a tail risk. It's within the normal band of outcomes for this region. So what do you watch to know which scenario is playing out? Track AIS, the automatic identification system that ships broadcast so other vessels can see their position. Tankers in sensitive waters sometimes transmit false GPS coordinates to avoid being targeted. This is called AIS spoofing. When spoofing activity in the Hormuz region spikes, it means commercial captains are scared. It means something is happening that hasn't made the news yet. Open source tools like Marine Traffic and Vessel Finder let anyone monitor this data. If you start seeing clusters of ships going dark, turning off their transponders entirely, or broadcasting positions inconsistent with their actual course, that's one of the earliest warning signs available, often visible days or weeks before any official announcement. Watch the ships. They don't lie as well as diplomats do. Also watch Lloyd's war risk rates. Watch whether the US Fifth Fleet announces any carrier repositioning. Watch whether Oman's foreign minister begins making unusual diplomatic trips. These are the real signals, not the press conferences. Come back to where we started. Ships sitting still, radars spinning, drones in the air, a ceasefire announcement that everyone on land is celebrating. The water doesn't care about the announcement. The mines don't care. The insurance actuaries at Lloyd's don't care. The fast attack boats dispersed along Iran's coastline don't care. What happens at Hormuz in the coming weeks will be decided not by the diplomats who signed that agreement, but by the naval commanders, the ship captains, the intelligence analysts watching satellite imagery at 3 a.m., and the Omani officials quietly making phone calls nobody is supposed to know about. A ceasefire is a beginning, not an ending. And Hormuz has a very long memory. Keep watching this space, because the next video is going inside the IRGC Navy itself, how a force built almost entirely of speedboats and asymmetric tactics nearly shut down the most important waterway on Earth. That one drops soon. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and drop your prediction below. Scenario 1, 2, or 3. Which one plays out? Full normalization, frozen conflict, or ceasefire collapse? Tell me your read. I read every comment.